and welcome to the Hadassah Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Claire Marrinan. The Hadassah Collective is a unique wellness-centered community created in and inspired by India, the birthplace of holistic health disciplines. The Hadassah Collective Podcast brings together a carefully curated selection of my most trusted and inspiring innovators from every area of the health and wellness space. I invite my guests to freely share their gifts, their wisdom, their journeys, and their diverse points of view, discussing a vast range of topics including shutdown and self-isolation strategies, integrated diet and fitness, yogic science, modern mental health, and holistic lifestyle, all to inspire you with relatable tools to help you consciously customize, support, and expand your life. In this episode, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Vanessa Albury. She is a visual artist, an activist, and an Akashic Records reader. She is the founding artist and director of Coral Projects, the first underwater 100% ocean-friendly eco-contemporary art exhibition on a coral reef at a fish sanctuary in Jamaica. Her personal work has been exhibited all over the world in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. And Vanessa is also deeply passionate about energetic work, specifically focusing on sleep hygiene. As a sufferer of narcolepsy for many, many years, she has really developed a system to help people really tune into the deep-rooted causes of sleep apnea and narcolepsy and how anyone can actually just practice better sleep hygiene. So we're really focusing on that in this episode. We also delve in quite deeply to specific areas of trauma within her childhood that sort of triggered different areas of her narcolepsy and how she has navigated healing that and restoring that so that she can balance those aspects of her life. And she's teaching other people now how to do that too. And so it's really interesting talking to Vanessa because she's so energetically connected and she's so creative. And it's really beautiful to see how psychology, energetic work, and art has really helped her evolve and grow and heal. Hi, Vanessa. Welcome to the Hadassah Collective. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Claire. It's my true delight and pleasure.
So I'm so excited to dive into some of the really interesting things you've been doing with the Akashic Record readings and just your journey through narcolepsy and sleep hygiene. I think that this is really interesting and really impactful for people because it's really something that people struggle with, and not necessarily with narcolepsy, but a lot of people struggle with good sleep hygiene. And it's so, so important for our overall health and our mental well-being. So why don't we just start with you telling me a little bit about how you got on this path and just describe your early life to me. Where did you grow up and what did that time look like? And did any of that contribute to or shape your journey?
Well, the short answer is for sure. Yes. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee in the South. Some people call it the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And I grew up in a divided family, whereas my parents divorced when I was around 4 around religion. So my dad became a very intensely involved Jehovah's Witness, and that was sparked by my birth. He decided when I was born that he wasn't living the kind of life that he needed to be living to be responsible for somebody else. And he was a doctor working full time. You know, they had a country club membership. I guess it was we. I just don't remember it. Mm-hmm. And my mom was just like, no, this is not what I signed up for. And they just butted heads. It was just immediate war. And so I was the battleground and the prize being fought over. And it was very difficult to say the least. Yeah. So I would bounce, back and forth between two households that were completely misaligned and had down to the smallest what I wore on a daily basis or what school activities I would participate in level of disagreement about how I should be raised. And they both thought that to serve my best interest, they should fight for their version of what my life should be, instead of thinking like, oh, maybe this child needs like a consistent, calm circumstance. So my narcolepsy symptoms began in my early teens, around 13 or 14, so the enduring stress and strain of living, divided lives, and in neither household, like being fully embraced as who I am. And not because they didn't want to, but I learned to hide who I was so that I could fit into these two worlds and be loved. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of undoing in that wind up toy. So the narcolepsy kicked in around my aunt's death. She died suddenly in a car accident on New Year's Day. And in 1994, she was my one always super enthusiastic advocate, like annoyingly so, right? It's like one of those doting, aunts who you're just like, okay, stop hugging me now,
Oh, I love them.
Yeah. But at the time, and I carried guilt around like not fully appreciating her when she was with me. So she died. And then also my best friend, which was my dog. I know that may sound ridiculous to some people, but we got Sunny the month after I was born, and we were inseparable. Like I spent every day of my childhood outside singing in the backyard with her, So yeah, narcolepsy became this way that I escaped the ever spiraling chaos of the two households I lived in. My father was very well-intended, but very harsh and judgmental and nitpicking, like on the smallest level, because he thought he had to be perfect, right? He was projecting his wanting to make up for lost time of being imperfect and not being aligned with his true calling onto me. And then my mom was a drunk, and not wanting to admit it. My stepfather didn't want to admit it. Nobody wanted to admit it but me,
Wow.
And she was the kind of drunk where she didn't drink a lot. It was that a little drop of alcohol changed her entirely. She just became a different person. And that side of my family, we have Native American heritage, Cherokee line, and also Irish. And during the Prohibition in America, our family ran a speakeasy in the basement.
Wow.
So there's, a lot of opportunity for alcoholism to trickle through my family on that line.
Wow.
So in a nutshell, that's how the narcolepsy presented. And I didn't know it until 2004 when I was diagnosed. In 2003, when I had just graduated from college, like 2 years before, I was working full-time in a law firm, but it kind of felt like part-time because they allowed me to work as much as it took to get my work done. And then I would work on my art practice, which was actually a pretty good deal for being a young artist.
Yeah.
I had good health insurance, and I drove home to Nashville. My dad sat me down. He was like, look, we need to talk. I think you have narcolepsy. And I was like, oh, like it had never occurred to me that I had a sleep disorder, even though I had been living all four symptoms that are listed in the DSM-4 and the DSM-5. There's a slight difference now in the diagnosis, but I have the cataplexy version of narcolepsy, where you lose all muscle tone for a brief instant. So quick that, for me, it's so quick that the other person, if I'm talking to someone, doesn't even notice it. And it's triggered by an extreme emotion. So my extreme emotion is a combination of being nervous and finding something funny, which is kind of a fun, weird combination.
That's really awkward for first dates, right?
Oh my God. That's when it showed up. of course,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, oh my gosh, did you see that? And the other person would be like, what are you talking about? Because they didn't notice it at all.
Oh,
But I
wow.
would lose vision temporarily and all my muscle tone.
That's so
Um,
interesting. So that's, I mean, 10 years
yeah,
before being diagnosed. So what did you think that was at the time?
I didn't think.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm tired. you
Lost
know?
in survival
Uh,
mode.
yeah, exactly. My
Mm.
body was just taking over, was taking the reins. And I wasn't in a place to acknowledge like any aspects of my life that created it.
Mm.
Because I was in survival mode from 0 to, maybe 5 to, 19, 20.
Wow.
And then when I got the diagnosis, it was like, wow, oh my God,
It makes sense.
you know,
Makes sense.
my whole life makes sense now.
Mm.
It
Wow.
was freeing.
Yeah. Wow. And so tell me, you've always been artistic. You've always been into art.
I've always appreciated art. I
Mm.
actually growing up thought I would be a marine biologist. I fell in love with the ocean as a
Yeah.
child. My dad's from Miami, my grandfather's from Miami, and we would snorkel on the coral reefs on the Keys. They had a house on Plantation Key, and it was just like absolute heaven. And it was the first place where I felt at home,
Mm.
which might sound a little strange, but
No.
with my head below the surface, hovering around the coral rocks and watching the colors and the fish and the movement, I just felt alive in a way that I can't describe beyond feeling like I was home.
Interesting. Interesting. And the Akashic record reading. Now I'm sure that it wasn't in its formal form until recently, but did you always have this ability to sort of dial into to other realms and to receive divine guidance?
Yeah,
How
for
did that
sure.
show up
And
as a
yeah,
younger
and
person?
sorry.
That's okay. How did that show up as a younger person?
Yeah, as a child, I remember um, being in my bedroom in this house that felt like my house. It
Mm-hmm.
was the house we lived in from when I was about 3 to 5 or 6. And I remember this distinct knowledge that if I were to look too long at something, that I could make it move with my attention.
Wow.
I've never really told anyone that before. Then I also had this intuitive connection to one of my best friends. She broke her arm in 6th grade when she was at a different school. And I knew that day that something was wrong. And I like rushed home and I called her. And I was like, Liz, are you okay? And she's like, I broke my arm. I'm like, I knew it.
Wow.
I knew something happened. And then the ultimate one that scared the holy crap out of me was after my aunt died that summer. She had been living in the house that she grew up in and my dad grew up in with my grandparents because Hurricane Andrew had destroyed her home in Homestead in Miami, the Miami area, in August of 1993. So she was living with them while her house was being rebuilt. And so all her stuff from high school and her current life were in that room still in the summer after she died. So we went down and visited my grandparents, and my sister and I stayed in that bedroom. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked to my right, and I saw in glowing white light the bodice of a female figure. It was a full figure, but I looked at it so quickly and was so scared that I immediately closed my eyes. And I was like, oh no, oh no, no. And I threw the sheet over my head. I was so scared. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to open my eyes and look through the sheet. And if I see that outline through the sheet, I'm just going to scream until one of my adults enters the room. And I saw it through the sheet. And I screamed. My sister slept through the whole thing, didn't hear a word of it. And my grandmother came in a few minutes, took her a few minutes to get in there. But I had the most interesting realization as, my gifts have opened up during the pandemic that I always thought that I had seen her, like a version of her, but the figure didn't fit her figure. She had, when she was younger, she had modeled, but as she got older, she was quite overweight actually. But she had all these dresses for like smaller sizes in her closet. So I thought I saw like an aspirational version of her form.
Wow.
But I realized that I time traveled to myself. That was me that I saw, because I did a vision in a meditation where I was, doing the TBM work that we do, the TBM magnetic work. And I was looking down on that version of myself, reprogramming that experience, and realized that I was looking through the perspective of that figure.
Wow.
Yeah. So those are some of the...
That's a lot. That's so good. That's so interesting. Because I was always just wondering, I mean, now I think that, spiritual giftings are quite cool almost, or definitely accepted, but in, a long time ago, it wasn't. And I'm just wondering how you felt about that, sort of knowing that you had these intuitive gifts and, what to do with them, or were you scared of them, or, how did you feel around them?
I was absolutely frightened. I was terrified because also remember, I'm being raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
And with love, with absolute love. But, the messaging is like anything like this is the devil's work. And like, you're not going to burn in hell, because they don't believe in that, but they do believe that then you just won't live in paradise forever with all your other family members who are going to be there. Which is also like quite sad.
That's a lot to put on you.
Sad for me, sad for my parents. And I had no idea what I was experiencing. And, my dad didn't really have the bandwidth to really help me talk through it.
Yeah.
So I had no one to talk to about it with. And then like, there would be moments in my life when like people would pop into my life that could talk to me about that stuff. And I would just be freaked out. I would just be terrified.
Yeah.
Because my story around being loved involved not being an aspect of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. To shut that down, to fit in with what your family expected.
Yeah.
So that kind of segues really nicely into my next question of what do you think the hardest things you've had to overcome have been? You're now a flourishing artist, with all these amazing projects. And you're now an Akashic record reader, and you're even coaching people in sleep hygiene. And so you really have sort of ascended past these limitations and these things that you found so hard when you were younger. What do you think is the hardest thing that you've had to overcome?
The hardest thing was something I didn't even know was happening, which I did Landmark Forum about 8 or 9 years ago. And that's something they talk about, what you don't know that you don't know, and looking for what you don't know that you don't know. I had zero self-love happening from my probably late 20s into my late 30s. And I had no idea. And this is the root of like the massive rock bottom in love that I experienced in January 2018 when I was crying for 4 days straight at my kitchen table. And then I started doing self-love meditations with this amazing lady, Agnes Vivarelli, who has these really beautiful, tender, compassionate self-love meditations for free on YouTube. And as I began to do them, I realized that I was like below the surface. Like I was so far down, buried in the ground, low in my self-love, and had no idea. And that, that was really the source of, all my struggles. And my struggles have been largely financial. And amazingly, I've been able to do incredible things on very little resources because I always believed that I could. My friend once told me that I was the richest poor person she had ever met because I travel the world with art projects everywhere and yet, struggled to pay my rent. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
So it's really, belief systems, but
Mm.
yeah, self-love and then like crawling like tooth and nail out of the ground. I had this vision in a meditation with a coach last summer, a beautiful woman, Carrie Van Kirk, of myself crawling from inside a crevice of an earthquake up towards the surface of the earth that had been scoured and scourged. It just was like all ash and dark, rich soil, but nothing else on the surface of the planet. And I was crawling up, peeking my head over the surface to see what was there, to see if it was safe to, invest in myself and love myself and really accept myself as I am.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that is actually really the journey for everyone. But it just, I think it looks really different for everyone. And I do think it depends on your upbringing, whether you're encouraged to be yourself. And I think that's something that's definitely shifting in parenting in more modern times is rather than, I've birthed this child into the world and, it's my job to give them everything that I've learned so that they can succeed or be happy in life. And now it's more of a perspective of this like brand new soul is coming into the world and what are they here to bring the world, and nurturing that out of them. And I've really seen that in a shift in parenting styles, definitely. But the self-love piece is a really difficult thing, I think, for some people, because it really is about acceptance and being like, this is me and this is enough, and this is what I've been gifted and this is what I'm meant to be in the world. And and being able to really own that, I think, is so important.
Feel safe in it.
Yeah.
That's my big, one of my big hurdles. I really love what you said around parenting being refocused. And I think Giselle Bündchen, she had a really beautiful interview where she talked about like the way that each one of her children, the 3 children, need to be parented differently, and that she's here as a guide for them to grow into their best version of themselves. Excuse me. As opposed to molding someone, you're guiding them.
Yeah.
That's a really beautiful analogy.
Yeah, and I think it's a really profound shift. And I don't think that previous parenting styles, it came from a space of wanting to equip the child with everything that they need to be happy and function in the world. But I think that came at a cost of their true expression of self as well. And so I think it's great to see that shift, that we've evolved past that.
Totally. And also the energetics of the world, as you and I talk about, are changing.
Yeah.
Like, I really love thinking about that in terms of money. As you know, I love Molly McCord, the intuitive astrologer. And she had a really beautiful series on star seeds from earlier this year. And in one of the episodes, she talks about the energetics of money shifting to love. So whereas when you invest in the things that you love, then also money comes towards you. Money will be attracted to love moving forward.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really profound shift in our world. Yeah. Incredible. So tell me, how did you overcome your self-doubt? Because you really are, doing the things that are really you, and that maybe were not accepted by your family, becoming an artist and not a doctor or a lawyer, reading the Akashic Records. What did that look like? How did you overcome that self-doubt? Because there must have been moments where you're like, they're right, and what I'm feeling is wrong. There must have been those moments where you questioned yourself. How did you overcome that?
Well, it's interesting because maybe other artists can relate to this. When you know your path, you know your path. Even when you don't have self-love, you still see your path. And I just always knew that I was a creative person meant to have a creative journey, and that my path as the black sheep of 2 families was going to look different than absolutely everybody else that I knew. that was always clear to me. And it's weird because like, I've always believed in myself inside of me, but I haven't always believed in other people's ability to believe in me.
Yeah.
So it's like the language around it that sits with me the clearest is that I'm too complicated to be supported. Like that I'm a very complex, interesting, fascinating person with all these skills and capacities and missions, but the world around me doesn't know how to engage with that. And that also relates to my being outside of time or feeling sometimes that I'm behind, too far behind or too far ahead.
Yeah.
So it's been more a struggle around how do I show other people who I am authentically and from a place of not only knowing and believing in myself, but knowing and believing that they can understand me too.
Yeah. And that in your own self-expression, like it's almost like you know the things that you're here to bring, but you're not sure that the world values them. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Or that like it values that, like individuals value them, but the system as a whole, does that value it? And how do I fit into the economics of the world of, with these gifts? Because I chose or like became, or was already an artist, meaning that I'm in a career path that doesn't have a minimum wage. It doesn't have a guaranteed wage. You can theoretically work your entire life and never make a penny on your work, the starving artist concept, right?
Yeah.
So, and we have many examples from history of people that have lived that very existence. And yet I know that that's not my path, to live in obscurity and slave away unseen.
Yeah. And I mean, there are many examples also of artists that do not walk that path as well, I think.
That's true.
But yeah, you're right. It is but it is a kind of, stereotype that it's like, be slaving away, creating all this amazing art that's only really appreciated like 100 years after your passing. Thing, so yeah. Definitely. And so describe,
there's also the thing around like visual artists don't get paid to show their work. In every other creative arts field, there's some modicum of income that comes. Even on Spotify, they give the musicians 0.00001 penny, right, per play or something like this. But for visual artists, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. So interesting. It's a tough road to navigate, I think.
And I think I chose that.
Yeah.
Like purposefully without consciously knowing I chose it purposely, but yeah.
But do you think also like your family's, I'm not going to say misapproval because or non-approval of it, but I think it's more a misunderstanding of why you would want to go down that road, because it is tough. There isn't a very defined career path in art, it's really carving your own way. But do you think that sort of like maybe lack of understanding from your family spurred you on to keep pushing forward in that?
Well, you said something to me that makes me want to say yes to that question a few weeks ago, which was that if I was comfortable in my family and home life in Nashville, I might not have ever been inspired enough to leave. Because I do deeply love all of my family members, and I miss them so much especially during this pandemic time. I like to go home 3 or 4 times a year. And of course I haven't been home in over 1.5 years now. So there's something around, that discomfort and that total chaos pushed me out of the nest and pushed me to Charleston, where I went to undergrad and discovered my artistic talent and stepped into becoming an artist.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's all a matter of what time and point in perspective, you look back at an experience, right? And,
Yeah.
10 years ago, it's like I was still in trauma around everything.
Yeah.
But now I can look back and really appreciate the 4 adults who participated in raising me. It reminds me of a conversation I recently had with my stepfather, where I was able to find my true, sincere gratitude for his role in my life. And, he was not a great stepfather. He was a great father to my sister. He was a great husband to my mother, but it was not pleasant for me.
Yeah.
And I know, I was able to then step into looking back at his experience and what he was thrown into. Like suddenly, he's fallen in love with a woman who is a mortal enemy with her ex-husband who she raises a child with. That's terrible. So everyone in our family was impacted, by that battle, that, decades long battle.
Yeah.
And he stuck with my mom, and he didn't abuse me physically, right? He didn't take it out on me in ways that he could have. And instead, he's become someone that I look to for an example of how I don't want to end up creating my life. And I'm really grateful for that role. He's had to play the villain. I cast him in the role of villain in my life.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much from interacting with him and living in parallel. We actually have the same birthday. He's 30 years older than me to the day. So I was able to tell him that I was so thankful for that and really tap into feeling it and meaning it. And, he very much appreciated that and said that actually there were conversations like this he had wished he had with people before they died. And I think it was a really healing experience for both of us.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think as children, we, and it's very natural to do this, is that we don't look at our caregivers as humans. We don't have that capacity yet. We see them as something, I don't know, higher than us, or when I'm older, I'll be perfect kind of thing. As children, we have that image of adults as got it all together, when in reality they're living their own lives. They're going through stuff as well, and trying to raise children in the best way that they can. So I think it's great when you can come through something like that and have that perspective and recognize, hang on a second, what you were in was not easy either, and have that compassion. I think that's incredible. And so describe some wellness modalities or spiritual practices that have really supported your journey.
Well, I think the first one was really sitting with, my lack of self-love and examining the roots of that. So that started with meditation that I began on I think it was January 2nd in 2018. And that led me to the Orgasmic Manifesting program by Lorianne King, which is super fascinating. And then that led me to be magnetic. So the neuropathway reprogramming through self-hypnosis and journaling, and uncovering shadow and inner child wounds, and stories around money, and stories about, all the stories that we make up to explain why our life has gone the way that it has gone. And then I think one of the biggest spiritual tools that I've used was, a bit of an accident, which is being isolated, being away from people during this pandemic. I think that quietness really allowed me to go into myself, and yoga also, which really allows me to release the tension and the parts of my body that store these unhealthy programs that my body is running.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is really important to go and have a look at the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and what certain things mean about us, that we've made things mean about us.
Yeah.
You know, certain situations. And I think it's really important to go back, like you said, about inner child healing, to go back and look at those moments where we decided something about ourselves based on how somebody else treated us, how something worked out, whatever, and go back and look at those things with adult eyes and be able to release and have some understanding around those times and be able to release that story. I think that's one of the biggest things for me as well, is or where I see the most, profound shifts is when I kind of go back to those stories and sort of untie them, I think, and release them. So that's really, really interesting. And yes, we both love to be magnetic work and the meditations and the journal prompts.
Thank you, Lacey.
Thank you, Lacey. I'm not sure she listens to the podcast, but thank you for the gift of that. I've found the structure of her workshops and things like that really, really useful. And tell us what does your daily routine look like? So you've mentioned a few different modalities. Are these things that you practice every day, or are they things that you pick up when you feel like you need to?
I'm going to go with both because it is every day that I need to. My days start in an ideal world with waking up earlier and earlier every day so that I have enough time, so I don't feel the pressure of time to, start being accountable to other people. Having a glass of lemon water, taking a shower, and going immediately into the Akashic Records. And then I look at what I need to do for the day. I try not to get into that yet. I try to do some yoga first, at least half an hour. Makes a world of a difference for my body and then my mental health. And I eat. And then I'm also constantly thinking about, and this is maybe a bit of an Achilles heel, but like, how can I next best act in line with my healing journey? Like, what's the next thing I can do to get even farther? It's like that, it becomes a bit of a constantly fixing yourself thing, which I'm getting out of.
Yeah.
But, that's always on my mind. Like, even when I'm, working or whatever, like, it always crosses my mind, like, what's the next thing I can do? And, fortunately, I trust the process a lot more now, and I trust myself a lot more now. And I can,
But that's an interesting conversation to have, I think, because I do sometimes recognize that in the wellness world, I think, wellness, alternative spirituality world, that it's always about fixing yourself and, what's the next thing that I need to reprogram? What's the next thing that I need to fix? What's the next thing that, I need to work on? And it's, there's something about that I don't find healthy. It's sort of, it's also a sort of bypassing your life. Like, it's not, counting your blessings. You're not living in the now, which is something that is so widely sort of preached in the wellness world, because it's like, oh, as soon as I heal those childhood wounds, then I'll be amazing. And it becomes like that. And I think it's really unhealthy. And I think there's a space also of this kind of puritanical perfectionism, I would call it, in the wellness space, that I just don't agree with. Like, we're human and we're meant to be human, we're meant to go from angelic to, the other end of the spectrum. And that's fine. And I think it's about honoring all of those spaces and all of those parts of ourselves, so.
Yeah, it's like anti-self-love to be like a rigorous perfectionist.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I've got to do my self-love practice today. I've got to do my I don't love myself if I don't do my self-love practice today. And it's just like, yeah, it's so funny actually if you zoom out and think about it. But yeah, I'm glad that you agree and have some flexibility as well, because I really like to just tune in and see what I need for that day. You know, does my body going to move? And
some days it's like more of a challenge to, accept myself as I'm showing up. But a message I got recently in the Akashic Records was that actually aligning with allowing myself to be at peace in whatever version of the day I'm experiencing, like allowing that to be perfect is the aligning with perfect timing, is aligning with divine timing. And that time actually revolves around me. The things that are meant for me will not miss me because they realign in time and space according to where I am in time and space with myself. And so the more I can let go of the perfectionist tendency, the more I can embrace my inner peace, the more quickly I'm aligning with what I'm calling in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm briefly interrupting this episode to bring you some information on one of my most favorite resources, the Kundalini Lounge. If you have been listening to this podcast for a little while, you will know that I'm a daily practitioner of Kundalini Yoga. I find it to be such a powerful practice to move stagnant energy through and out of the body using breath and sound and movement. And the Kundalini Lounge brings together some of the most experienced teachers in the industry, and they have put together an entire video library consisting of hundreds of videos for you to choose from. And there are specific videos that target ailments that you might be struggling with or wanting a specific outcome. And there are also different workshops as well that explain some of the dynamics in Kundalini Yoga on and off the mat. So it's an incredible resource to have, and they are inviting you to join their community for the first 7 days for free. So you can register at kundalinilounge.com. And after that, when you use the promo code Hadassah, you also receive an extra 20% off any membership type that you will choose. So I hope you enjoy this resource as much as I do and get a lot out of it. So let's talk about the Akashic Records. For people who don't know, why don't you give us a brief overview of what the Akashic Records are and what readings look like as well?
Yeah. So I think I'm kind of an outlier on this topic. So the Akashic Records are this body of information that exists in all dimensions. So we exist in the 3-dimensional plane, and many of us are aspiring and ascending into a 5D awareness, right? And then there's the 7th dimension, 11th, and so on and up and up. And the idea is that the Akashic Records hold information from all these dimensions. And so that therefore it holds information across time and space for all creatures, everyone alive. And you can tap into your past, present, and future in the Akashic Records. A lot of people use them for past life travels, like understanding who they were in past lives. And when I took a class on Akashic Records readings, I received the information from the guides that I had been in my records my whole life already. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that explains a lot. And that...
Who are the guides in the Akashic Records?
Yeah. Well, each person connects with a different set of guides, and depending on who you learn how to access them through, you're in a different line of ascended masters. Okay. So the person that I studied with, Maureen St. Germain, who has a wonderful class that I really enjoyed, the ascended masters that she connects with are the Lord Sanat Kumara, who is also known as the Green Man, the Divine Director, and the Goddess of Liberty. And when I go into the records now, at least for the last like 2 weeks, they've been telling me also to add a few other energies to that list for my own guides. And yeah, I think, some people naturally already always connect with their guides and their record keepers already, and other people struggle to connect with them. And for me, the Akashic Records are a way to ground my gifts into the real world, because I have very fantastical sleep experiences that are visions and real and vivid, where I touch, taste, feel, sense everything happening in my sleep state, like I'm having an experience in real life, including conversations with living and deceased people that I know and don't know. So that can become, at least for me, pretty overwhelming, because they're very intense experiences to where, and they played out in the real world too. Like I was taking a nap one day and suddenly I was in a vision meditation experience. I never quite have the right word for it, with my ex. And I felt him tangibly with me in the bed, like touching me and kissing me and being intimate with me. And I had not seen him for many months. So I reached out to him, and of course he had just been having a very vivid experience in his imagination with me. And, I really get that we are all connected in that plane, in that sphere, in those realms. Yeah.
And what can
Did I
people
answer that
expect?
question?
Yeah, absolutely. What can people expect from an Akashic Records reading from you? Because I know that you have a really different approach to anyone that I've ever heard of, actually.
Yeah. So the way that I'm doing readings now are what I'm calling mini Akashic Records readings, which is basically I get permission from the person, which is their full name, their date and place of birth, and where they currently live. And I go into the records myself. So in traditional Akashic Records reading, I go into my records, quote unquote, and then ask my record keepers and guides if there's a message that I may relay to this person. And then my record keepers and guides connect with theirs and their higher self, and then we pull something out. And funnily enough, it almost always relates to my journey in my life, which I think is really interesting, because they'll remind me of experiences in my life that they then ask me to tell the person after the reading is complete. So I receive the person's information, their payment, and then I wait for the record keepers and guides to tell me that it's their turn. It takes within a week typically to get a message for a person. And then I transcribe it in my journal, and then I voice record it and send it to the person via email. So I've also started to do like 3 questions at a time. I'm kind of building up to full readings where we spend an hour and a half, together live, where we're in the records for, most of that time. They don't want me to just jump into that immediately. They actually gave me this version, which they told me to tell people that I invented. I feel weird saying I invented it, but then they're like, Vanessa, every good idea you've ever had, you got from us anyway. So yeah, you invented it. But yeah, so these mini readings, aren't done by anyone else. And they tell me that eventually other people will do these readings, and that this is a gateway for other people to begin to understand how they connect to their own records, which I think is really interesting. Wow. So eventually I'll do the full readings that are live in person, but I'm working up to that. And the way that this showed up, I think, is really interesting for me. I was upstate, chasing waterfalls in upstate New York, seeing a waterfall every day for a week, which was amazing. And I was going to visit a friend of mine, Jason, who I hadn't seen in years. He's another artist, and he was attacked in like a queer hate crime in 2016 twice in a row and received a very traumatic injury from it. And I didn't really know the full details. I just knew that, he was at home a lot and not really going out. And I just happened to be near him. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go, I'll visit my friend. So I went into the records and that the day before, and I was just like, is there a message that I can relate to my friend? And they were like, yes, tell him that his archive is very important, that he needs to keep it in this place and like this in his house, and that his masterpiece is coming, that he is still a valuable artist, and that he shouldn't give up on himself.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, like, he already knows that, right? Like, he already knows he's a valuable I know he's a valuable artist, so he must know. So I called him the day before I saw him, and I was like, hey, I'm doing this crazy thing, which is how I kind of present it to everyone, because I never know, where they are on this journey of psychic ability.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to hear it. What is it? And I tell him, he was like, Vanessa, today, this very day, I've been moving my archive around my entire house, so frustrated, wondering if it's even worth keeping this stuff, because I haven't made art in years and I feel so disconnected from, this practice, and I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. And it brought him to tears. It was really beautiful.
Wow.
It was really profound. And so then I had a couple more messages come through for other people. And then they were like, okay, now you get to do this for total strangers.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. So amazing. And tell me now about the narcolepsy and sleep hygiene, and what can people expect from a workshop that you present around sleep hygiene, and how you've overcome this?
Yeah. So I approach narcolepsy as my superpower. I've turned it into something that I use to really see myself and see where I need to continue to look, and where I can continue to work on accepting and revealing myself to the world and to the people that I know and love as who I authentically am. Because that's actually, where it came from, hiding, right? Like sleeping to hide and avoid the conflict of who I was compared to the systems and the situations that I was within. So I've been on a bit of a journey around protecting myself in sleep as well, because I've had very terrifying vision experiences where energies come to me and like try to have sex with me or try to enter me through my wrists, or are very menacing and unwelcomed to say the least.
Terrifying.
It was terrifying. And Shaman Durek actually told me, he was like, the reason that you have those experiences is because you are inviting them. And why do you think you're inviting them? And I was like, yeah, I get that. It's like me reminding myself that I have a bigger life experience that I'm not acknowledging yet. And so as I've begun to embrace my bigger experience as a human creature in this body and also an energetic body,
yeah,
I'm able to minimize those unpleasant experiences and really connect with like the energetic shifts in my apartment and the energetic shifts in my body and my being, and then adjust so that I maintain a, copacetic, peaceful, like room and sleep environment. So in the workshop, I talk about how to energetically clear yourself and your room and create that same kind of peaceful environment. It involves mirror work, which has become very important in my life. I had no idea how powerful mirrors are. But basically, I've learned that no mirrors in your bedroom is the way to go. And if you have one, it should be at all times covered unless you're using it. So the moment that you're looking at it, it's revealed, and then you cover it right back up. And I just have one tiny mirror that used to be my grandmother's. It's like one of those makeup mirrors that flips back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just have a scarf draped over that. But I recently got rid of this huge mirror that was in my bedroom And the energetic shift in my bedroom was just astronomical. It went from, this is a room that I'm in to this is my second skin. Like, this room is an extension of my body.
Yeah.
The mirror had that much going on.
Wow. And so what is the reasoning behind that? They're like a portal, or?
Yes, exactly. They're energetic portals that also exponentially magnify. So
wow.
I've had visions where I was in my room. Often this is how it happens in my sleep paralysis states that were traumatic, but also in my visions. I'm in my bedroom, but the horrific version is that it's flipped upside down and all red with this obelisk coming down from the center of the ceiling, and it's the horror version of my bedroom, and beings coming at me, terrifying me basically. And I realized later that was the reflection of my space in the mirror, and I traveled through the portal of the mirror. It's been described people that have this easy capacity to leave their bodies were often described as porous, which I think is an interesting analogy, with a porous stone where you just come in and out of your being, out of your body. So I also help people troubleshoot whatever they're experiencing in their sleep states. And I encourage, crystals that are aligned, and also organic materials, not sheets that have poly materials in them, and nothing fake. It's all real, but only natural fibers is a big part of it.
And is that
as well.
Is that for grounding?
It's definitely grounding. It's also, I guess that's probably the simplest way to describe it. It's because with the invention of rubber, that's when humans stopped having their connection to the earth, right? That's there's a movie called, I think, Earthing, that talks about that, where the rubber on your shoes, on your soles of your shoes, stop the energetic ions from the earth entering your body. So silks and cottons and linens and wool, so lush.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who maybe doesn't have something like narcolepsy, but just wants to practice better sleep hygiene? So they cover the mirrors in the room, they energetically cleanse themselves, and any other tips for good sleep hygiene?
Let's see.
I mean, having cotton sheets and natural fabrics around you.
And if you're having trouble falling, I think, it's for each person, it's what's your problem, and let's problem solve it. But if you're having trouble falling asleep, for example, what are you doing the 2 hours leading up to sleep? Where is your phone when you're sleeping? Is it in your bed with you? Are you looking at it while you're going to sleep? That's not a great idea. Keep it at a distance. What's the lighting like in your bedroom at night? I have a red light bulb. I don't actually have any trouble falling asleep. It's a gift of narcolepsy. I hit REM within 8 minutes of closing my eyes, which for most people it's multiple hours. But that red light, it reduces the blue light level in the room, and then allows your hormones to adjust to the nighttime hormones, the sleepy time hormones, because when the sun goes down, the blue light also goes with it typically. Of course, in our culture, we use blue light at all times, but I think the biggest thing is what's up with your phone when you're going to sleep, the 2 hours before you start to fall asleep. And are you watching TV in those 2 hours? Because what you watch on TV, oh boy, that majorly impacts your ability to sleep.
Wow. Yeah, it really does. And it's such an interesting thing, our addiction to television, because it's I don't think people realize, and even sometimes it's not that I don't realize, but I fully am aware that when we're watching TV, we are actually in a theta brainwave state. So our brain is so impressionable in that state. It's the same state as, semi-hypnosis. And
Exactly.
so it's so impressionable. I mean, I went through a time, I think earlier on in the lockdown, where I was like, I've got to stop watching so much murder, and it was like everything on Netflix was, around solving murders and things like this. And I was just like, because I know about, neural reprogramming and things like that. I was just like, this cannot be good, to do. So I think that that's a really good tip to just be hyper aware of what you're taking in when you're scrolling through Instagram, when you're watching TV. It's really important because it actually does, leave impressions in our psyche.
I had to wean myself off of Special Victims Unit.
Yeah, I love all those shows. I really do.
And like Mariska Hargitay is like such an amazing actress and like so powerful.
Yeah.
So I always like kind of explained it away, like I'm watching this empowered woman, be a badass, but like actually it's like completely horrific, that entire show.
Yeah, it's crazy. So who have been some major influences or sources of inspiration or mentors for you in your life? And they can either be in your real personal life or public figures.
I love that. So I'm going to say, first off, one of my teachers in high school, Mr. Kantz, he really saw my unique skill set and ability and my analytical process and my wonderment. He told me one time, he said, Vanessa, you have a gift of wonderment. And in the future, some people might tell you that it's childish or childlike, but ignore that because it's actually vital to who you are as a person. And you want to hold on to that. People lose it as they get older and it's very valuable. I think about that a lot. And then my photo teacher from college, Michelle Van Paris, she helped me create my first solo show, which was actually related to my gifts. I sandwiched black and white negatives of these empty, abandoned spaces throughout the Charleston area, which Charleston is one of the oldest cities in America and also the city that most of the slaves that came to America came through.
Yeah.
So talk about haunted places. And I would go into these abandoned buildings to face my fear of ghosts, but using the camera lens to protect myself, because there's this amazing thing that happens when you look through a lens. You disconnect from the reality that you're in, and it's a mediated experience as the taker of image. So you're suddenly, whatever you see in front of you, it's like you're watching the TV version of it. It's not, you don't experience it as a real experience in your body. So interesting.
That's
so
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it says a lot about our society now, taking photos of every moment.
Yeah.
And publishing those photos. It's like, are we really living them, or are we experiencing them through Instagram or something?
This is the fad of like art becoming, a selfie backdrop. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because art is about communication. It's about a living live dialogue between the creator and the viewer, and the back and forth. Every time you visit a piece, you're meant to have a new experience because you're a new person each time you visit the piece. So there's new information for you to gain from that dialogue. And if you're just standing in front of it and taking a selfie every time, you've completely lost the value of art.
Yeah.
It devastates me to see that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, the like whole selfie rage, catapults artists like Yayao Kusama, who is another person that I absolutely adore and love. It's catapulted her into a major artist, known to, she's a household name in a lot of households. Not every house. I wish it was every household, but she's not Andy Warhol yet. But but she's finally getting the respect and kudos she deserves in her late 80s and 90s. And it's largely because her installation, it's like a full room installation of mirrors with a water floor and these little lights. So it's like an infinity room where you're just suspended in light. It's so beautiful.
Wow.
But that created a selfie, selfie rage. And people stand in line for hours to just be in that box for 30 seconds to take a selfie. But her whole point is around that feeling of being suspended in infinity, that like completely terrifying and also completely freeing experience of being just a being floating in space.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, her work is really powerful.
Yeah. And what resources would you recommend that you think would be useful to our listeners, like books or podcasts, Instagram, YouTube channels? Who do you think would be useful to our listeners? Who do you love?
Well, I do love Expanded, and which is Lacey Phillips' podcast, and Molly McCord. Like, she's spot on for me for an astrologer.
Yeah.
And her intuitive gifts. But I also really love Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard.
Okay.
And Monica Padman, because what I love about them is that they're authentically themselves. They're curious naturally, and they just play off each other in this really sweet way, and then have, interesting conversations with major public figures, but it's not the same conversation that those public figures are having with the Today Show or, with some other, because they're coming from their authentic selves, who they are. And I think, it's really about, for me, finding the voices that are embodying their authentic selves.
That's who you want to hear from.
And a book that I highly recommend to absolutely everyone is The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. It's a really beautiful story-based narrative of these experiences that she has had and researched across America, where racism has negatively impacted white people, which I think is something that we don't think about, that, there's actually a loss for every human being when we act from a place of fear, scarcity, and racist
division.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so tell us what's next for you. What new projects are you working on? Tell us about choral projects. I'm dying to hear.
Choral projects.
Yeah.
I love that. So I am working on choral projects, which is my underwater ecological, ocean-friendly, entirely art exhibition on a regenerating coral reef in Jamaica at a fish sanctuary. And I've also adapted the project to fit in other places. Like, there's going to be a version in New York as well, where we do have cold water corals here, but really the issue here is around oysters. So there'll be artworks that will be created as oyster reefs. So with choral projects, we're creating, 100% eco-friendly artworks made from sustainable materials that are sourced on the site in the place where the works are made and will live. And the idea is that the ocean life gets to take over these pieces and transform them. So that's like a true healing marriage between art and the underwater world. And I'm really committed to integrity on all fronts in this project. Like, all the works must be sustainable and eco-friendly. Everyone must be paid a fair wage for their labor, and equal wages as well, which is actually kind of a big concern in Jamaica, because a lot of outsiders will come into the country and pay, native Jamaicans less than they'll pay the people that they bring in with them.
Yeah.
Which, that's terrible. And also, full integrity on the art front, which I think a lot of people take for granted. A lot of the artworks we see underwater now, they're perpetuating narratives that we already associate with the ocean, like mermaids and like a snorkeling mask or like a scuba helmet or like, an oversized sea turtle. And where those things are lovely in what they are, but art, as I said already, is about dialogue. I'm not extending my dialogue in looking at another mermaid underwater. I want to see what somebody living today comes up with that's magical, fantastical, and expands my consciousness when I engage with it. So all the artworks are made by emerging and established contemporary artists who are really thinking about the issues of today and the visual language around expressing that. So I'm working on the fundraising for that. And, it's kind of in a journey around, who is the right fit for helping me be able to make it happen.
Yeah, amazing. And so can you leave us with one practical tip that you can leave with our listeners so that they could properly implement today? It can be a practice also that you use every day if you want to.
Yeah,
something like
that. I think that the biggest thing that's like on my mind these days that I'm thinking about on a daily and hourly basis is, what am I saying to myself right now? I'm alone most of the time, so I have my own thoughts circulating constantly, and it's just like stepping outside of the thoughts and looking at them. Yeah. Like, what story is running through my mind right now? And just like, pulling the reins on that for a second helps me examine which narratives are running that are actually like damaging to my psyche and to my well-being. And, pulling the reins on that and then retraining it. So like, for example, I'm also working on a podcast right now called The Power We Hold.
Yeah.
About my journey as a white ally, with my co-host Caleb Williams, who is a young Black artist, and she's actually 20 years younger than me. And I really love our dynamic. She's been very expansive for me. We're like co-mentors. She's my mentor in becoming a better ally, and I'm her mentor in the arts. But yeah, in working on this, like, I've been a little stuck around the editing of the first episode, and I recently realized the pathways in my mind that keep circling are around I'm independent and I have to do everything myself. But that's not actually true. There are plenty of people in my community that are eager and willing to help me with everything going on. So one thing that I did this week was I started asking for help where I thought I had to do everything. So like an example of that is I paid my laundromat to do my own laundry instead of me washing my own laundry, which may sound like simple and stupid, but releasing that control and that independent, I do everything myself, like opened me up for just, an extra $10. They do everything. Yeah. Opened me up in those 3 hours that I would have spent, running back and forth to the laundromat to like embody myself and like do yoga and, enjoy my life and feel at peace and feel supported. That's, I think, probably the biggest part of that. Another is with the podcast, asking my cousin, who's an audio engineer, to do the editing. Like, I've known he's an audio engineer for decades. Yeah. And for like 3 weeks now, I've been, slaving over how am I going to edit this thing? Because it needs actually a little more help than it will in the future on this first episode. And like, of course, he is the one to do it. But it really took me stepping outside of my current thoughts and looking at them to understand that, oh, I can ask for help in all these other areas that I wasn't even looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great tip, to be able to just observe what you're thinking and without being in it, without being in the thought, be able to just observe what it is. And so I think that's
just be curious about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. That was amazing. And so where can our listeners find you if they want to know more about your work?
Yes. So I've been teaching workshops with the Alchemist Kitchen. I have one coming up. I don't know the date right now, but within the next couple of weeks on sleep, another sleep hygiene workshop, which will be $15. They also offer scholarships. And my artwork, my personal work is on Instagram, which is at Vanessa Albury. Albury is Albury. And my website is also my name, vanessaalbury.com. Coral Projects is at coral.projects on Instagram. And also the website is coralprojects.com. And then the Akashic Records readings, it's the Akashic Records Reader on Instagram. And that's actually a really great place to look at testimonials that I've had from the 50 plus people that I've done readings for so far. And also where I like to handle the correspondence around new co-clients.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being with me, Vanessa. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you'd really have in your heart to share?
Well, one is just that I adore you so much. I love the conversations that we're in every week. And I think it's, really important on this journey of, not only my spiritual path, but also my healing journey from the inner child wounds that we all experience, to have other people as invested in the work as I am to engage with. And, you've been such a gift to me in that way, and the other people in our group. And I highly encourage, everyone to put yourself out there on a limb and find the people that you need to connect to. Like, let go of the relationships that don't serve your healing and your ascension and the path that you want to be on. Because when you let those go, all these new, more beautiful, more supportive, and more impactful relationships show up. Like, that's been my experience from quarantine. I made so many new friends, like in total isolation. It sounds counterintuitive, but yeah, I'm just so grateful to know you and to be, on this life journey with you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. Likewise. And thank you, Vanessa, for being a part of the Hadassah Collective. I really appreciate your insight, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Claire.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and you got some things to take away from our amazing guests' insight. If you did enjoy this episode, please subscribe and also leave us a review. And for more information on the Hadassah Collective, you can visit our Instagram page at Hadassah Collective. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode at the same time next week. And until then, have a wonderful week.